Welcome to Voter Interest Project's candidate interviews for 2023. I'm Alan McPheeters, the Executive Director of the Voter Interest Project. Our mission is to provide voters with the information they need to make informed decisions about government, candidates, and ballot measures. Our focus is local. We cover Island County, its cities and towns, and various special districts, as well as representatives from the 10th Legislative District. The 2023 elections are local and nonpartisan. We are covering 44 elective offices on this year's ballot, including mayors, city councilors, school board directors, and commissioners for court, hospital, fire, parks, and cemetery districts. 67 candidates filed for these offices during filing week in May, and we invited all of them to do interviews for you. We also have extensive coverage of these elections and the actions of these government agencies on our website, voterinterests.com. The following interview is with Christopher Wiegenstein, one of 3 candidates for position 2 on the Oak Harbor City Council. We provided a list of potential questions to the candidate in advance of the interview. Well, good evening. Today is Thursday, July 6th, and we're here with Christopher Wiegenstein. I listened to your swearing in to make sure I got that right. Yeah. I have a mental block. Wiegenstein,
yes, sir.
And Chris is running for the Oak Harbor City Council position number 2. Welcome to the Voter Interest Project.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. I appreciate it, Alan.
You bet. Where are you today?
I'm at my office here located downtown Oak Harbor.
And
right off Pioneer.
And I know this is on the list, but where is your office? What do you do there?
I am a mental health professional. I serve adolescents to aging adults, and I also serve veterans through the VA Community Cares Network. So,
oh, very good. Yeah. Important work.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Are you married or single?
I am single. I do have a girlfriend who lives with me. We've been together about a year, known each other 14 years. Oh, been real good friends. So, yeah.
Very good. And do you have children?
I do. I have 3 adult children. They all reside in Montana with some of my grandkids. So,
oh, very good.
Yeah.
And were you raised here on Whidbey? Did you move here?
Yeah, let's get right into that. My family arrived in 1958 when my grandfather was stationed here with the Navy. All of my aunts and uncles, my mother's the oldest of 9, who graduated from Oak Harbor High School. I was born in Bellevue in 1971. However, due to circumstances, we moved to Oak Harbor in 1975. Mom came home and made her home here. And so raised in Oak Harbor, because have always considered Oak Harbor home of record. I did spend a few years in Montana, as every good Oak Harbor son or daughter does at times. They go off and explore the world, and we come home. So,
sure, absolutely. Always nice to come home. Did you serve in the military? I
did. I served in the Washington Army National Guard.
Oh, very good.
Did about from 91 to 95.
Very good. And so you're a mental health counselor. We could probably talk about this for an hour. What is the biggest challenge in your day job that you have to solve every day?
Not enough of me and too many people needing help. That's the biggest challenge. How do I navigate handling the calls coming in? My phone will ring anywhere between 3 to 10 calls a day for people potentially looking for counseling or some help of some sort and there's just not enough time in the week to do all that. So the biggest challenge is not having enough providers. I could easily put a couple people to work if I had people that could come to work and could live here to work. So
sure. What do you have a specialty, a certain kind of a problem that you have with? Or
yeah, I do work depression, anxiety, PTSD. I am certified EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, as well. So that helps with trauma with first responders and veterans and anybody else who has suffered some sort of a trauma. I do work with adolescents. I enjoy working with adolescents. About 13 to on up really is my age. You know what you do, and I fell into that kind of haphazardly. I wasn't really thinking that was going to be my population that I was going to work with, and then I ended up with an opportunity to work at a therapeutic boarding school, and wow, I fell in love with working with those kids and those families. And so when I moved back to Oak Harbor, I made it a point to make sure I incorporated and continued to do that kind of work. And I also am a substance use disorder professional, which means I'm essentially an addictions counselor as well. And that's the basis of what really started this journey for me, was that. So been doing that a little bit longer than the mental health, and really hope to expand and grow my business to be able to include some intensive outpatient treatment in the future.
Certainly an enormous amount of need for that work.
Enormous. Yeah.
Now I know that you have been on the Board of Commissioners for the North Whidbey Pool Park and Recreation District. How long have you been, or were you on that, since you're not?
Yes, I'm not now. I resigned after being appointed to city council in position 4 there in May. I had done essentially it was 1 4-year term, a little over 3 years. I was sworn in January of 20.
Very good. How do you think that has prepared you to be on the city council?
I think one, it's an elected position, so you're answering to the voters and the constituents in our communities. Smaller scale than the city by far when it comes to budget and finances and all that. However, run very similar in those instances, though at a much smaller scale, right? So it's definitely so that little bit of government work, being able to frame that, approving budgets, handling a little bit of staff issues as they come up. And then I think uniquely it helps me with the city of Oak Harbor as we go forward in the infrastructure crisis, I guess is what we could call it, as we move forward to try to rectify that problem and get it fixed, and be able to have a long-term plan on how to maintain what we do fix so that we don't find ourselves in this position before. That's similar to what I walked into when I walked into the North Whidbey Pool Park and Rec District with the aging facility, the John Vandersite Memorial Pool.
Right. How much of a surprise was it at that workshop late last month to hear that information from the Public Works Director?
Yeah, it was definitely a shock. I think in my gut, I already knew we had infrastructure problems. I've lived here a long time, off and on for a couple of decades, right? Most of my life at this point. And so I knew that we had, when you leave for a week, you come back and you turn your pipes on and they're a little bit, you gotta clear them out a little bit before you use the water. There's some infrastructure issues, not only on the property where I might be living, where other people might be living, but I'm sure that stems into an aging system that's been around for 40s, if not longer.
Yeah.
And so, wasn't too surprised, happily pleasant with hearing it though, and being apprised of the situation and the dire need of it, because I think it needs to be something we really truly focus on pretty wholeheartedly, along with many other things. So.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about the many other things.
Right.
What are the many other things?
Well, the mental health crisis in this community, which stems to every household, I would imagine. I don't know too many households who don't know somebody or know of somebody in their own personal family that have experienced some sort of mental health issue, whether it be depression, autism spectrum disorders, to PTSD, to, there's a litany of things. And then compounded that with, how do we do that as a city? I don't know that a city can really go in and say, we're going to fix mental health in Oak Harbor, but how can we support destigmatizing mental health so that the conversations are happen freely and openly, and we're not, it's okay. Like, if I'm struggling one day, I can say, hey, I'm struggling one day, and not feel shame within that. And I think the city can promote an atmosphere within that. I believe the city can also help, the community members figure out a way to enjoy each other even more than we already do. And we do a lot. I was just thinking about this last night when I was sitting out at the Buskers Park listening to a band practice that's going to play this weekend, I believe, at one of the breweries here in town. And I was thinking, like, this is what we're talking about, bringing people together to kind of hang out and have a good time. From May to middle of September, we do a really good job of that in this community. We have lots of activities and lots of things to get going. What do we have, and how are things continued on through the winter? where it's not so easy to go outside and enjoy something like that in an outside venue. So I'd like to see us have some conversations with those organizations that are pulling those on, and seeing how the city can be a part of that process. And I believe partnerships with the school district and North Whidbey Pool Park and Rec, as well as the United States Navy and Island County, to somehow create something that's going to be utilized year round, especially in those winter months, where we could continue to have this type of venues and activities and fun events where community can come together and hang out together, get to know one another, support one another. And that and all just brings up our mental health, giving us something to do together. You know, as a child growing up here, we always heard this: there's nothing to do in Oak Harbor for our kids.
Yeah.
There's nothing to do in Oak Harbor for our young adults either. And so I think we need to see what we can do as a city to be a part of that growth, and make it happen in a way that's, you know, going to be fiscally responsible.
Now, a lot of those events are put on by organizations like the Chamber of Commerce.
Mhm.
So what is the city's role in that?
Making sure they still can do that by having the ability to continue to do what they do by, like, we close down, city closes the roads
Mhm.
and puts up the signs, and the police force is on duty and extra duty that day, and just continue to make sure that kind of support is available. And if there's, you know, things that need to be built and zoning and construction need to be looked at, that we can take a look at that and how best to support those processes to help grow. And, you know, a side effect, so there's mental health talk, right? Side effects. A side effect of community coming together and venues where we can enhance and bring people in to enjoy us, other communities around us. The whole Whidbey Island would come and participate in some events that we would have. So would Langley, so would Anacortes, and some of the other facilities in the neighboring neighborhoods, as well as people coming in from out of town, which anytime we have a surplus of people come into our community, they spend money.
Yes.
They spend money, and that really helps our city, as well as these organizations doing the work that they do. And I think we can continue to support that and find ways to make that happen.
Very good.
Yeah.
Let's pivot a little bit.
Sure.
There's been a couple of things that have come up over the past really couple of years since the last time we had an election,
Yeah.
that have been surprisingly controversial. And one of them is public art. The whole argument about that statue finally going in at Flintstone Park. What's the role of the city in public art? Should they be putting up pieces of art like that?
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer, right? Because I think the city should be involved and in the process as well. It's very possible the city could do it. Should it come at an extra expense to our citizens? I don't think so. What could be done, and what I believe is being done, is it's already budgeted in place. That's what's kind of happened with this piece of art that people are upset about on social media. And what I know is these things are already going and happening in previous budgets. And so, you know, I don't have much say in what happened in the past. I can have some say on what goes on in the future. However, if we have a good looking downtown area and a great place for people to come, and art helps bring that in, and a place where we can showcase our local art. I mean, we have some phenomenal individuals, and from students to adults, and people that have come to this island that have also grown up here, that are fabulous artists. And why wouldn't we want to support and show that off? We just have to do it, you know, with a fiduciary mindset that allows us to do it without costing our taxpayers or citizens any more money than they already are paying out. Yeah. Art is one of those things they get for their tax dollars currently, as it looks like, right? As we talk about, right?
But you know, towards the end of that debate, someone floated, it might have been Brian Stuckey, may have been somebody else, the notion that that art is going to be paid for out of some money that is taken in with utility payments. And apparently it is within the city's power to discontinue that. They have a large surplus in that account right now because they couldn't spend any money during the pandemic. Would you support either phasing that out temporarily or on a permanent basis to give the taxpayers a break?
I would, if if we could do something to help lower costs for our taxpayers, I would be in favor of that. Absolutely. Would that, you know, I do also know that this art that goes in, that's being put in, isn't 100% paid for by the city either. It's a small portion of it, right? And so, you know, we're supporting all of our community in this as well. And so I'd have to really dig in, you know, and really understand the ramifications of the long-term phasing out and what it would mean to our long-term budgetary needs. And do we phase it out, or do we reallocate? The money's already being spent, so do we reallocate to fix other areas like infrastructure for a period of time? And then, you know, I just don't know, right? I'm a little new to the game still with the knowledge base that I'm getting. So, but honestly, yeah, I'm all in favor of reducing our expenses as much as possible on those utility bills, as well as continuing to take Oak Harbor and move it forward so that we don't lose traction on the growth that we've already done so well and over the last few years.
You've been, what is it, about 4 weeks that you've been in office now?
Yeah, a little over that, probably 5, I think. May 24th to, yeah, we're on July 6th, so
What?
Tuesday's the second real full council meeting, so.
Right. Have you, maybe you haven't been there long enough, but has there been anything that's really surprised you about being a city council member? Something you didn't expect?
Yeah, no, not yet. Not yet. You know, I've paid a little bit of attention over the years. I've watched and I've sat through Northwood East Pool Park and Recs, which is not nearly as publicized, though it is still a government run meeting and whatnot. And no, so far I have not seen anything that really surprises me. I am sure I will be, though. I'm open-minded to that. So,
well, you're still pretty new, so
yeah.
that's fine. So you're in this such a peculiar position. You are sitting in position number 4.
Yes.
You are running for position number 2.
Yes.
And so I've asked other candidates this, and I have to ask it slightly differently for you. But when you come up for re-election again, which let's assume that you're elected this November.
Yeah.
When you come up for re-election again, 4 years out, what do you have some benchmarks in mind, some things you could look back and say, hey, you should re-elect me because we accomplished this while I was in office? What is this?
Well, the community togetherness is really strong and important to me, and I'd like to see some benchmarks. I don't know exactly what that looks like yet this early on, but I'd like to be able to look back and say, yeah, we've achieved supporting these organizations and growing these activities and community engagement throughout the year-round process. The infrastructure that just got thrown in our lap, which we kind of knew about, but got thrown in our lap, absolutely. Some inroads on how to get that going moving forward and how we can support that process of you know, fixing what our problems are and having a long-term plan. I'm a long-term thinker. What we do in the next 4 years has to have an impact and effect of 50+ years. And not that it's set in stone, things can always change, right? Sometimes when I'm driving down the road, I don't like to take the same way back, even though it might be quicker. So I might detour a little bit. Sometimes we have to have some detours to fix things that come up, or new ideas come in that might be a little bit better than what we had presented previously. And we have to be willing to move along and be supportive of those changes. And at the same time, have those long-term plans. So yeah, benchmarks would be having some long-term plans somewhat laid out till we have an idea of a roadmap of kind of where we're going. Understanding that we're going to have some road bumps along the way that we'll need to smooth out.
Of course.
Yeah.
What comes to mind is always that Northeast 7th Avenue project, which has been on the plan for at least a dozen years.
Well, I think about that project as one in particular, is I drive that road almost every morning because I take my Siberian Husky, whose tail you saw earlier, walk behind me. I take her to a dog park in the mornings where we have a little bit of a stroll before we come into the office, and I drive that road. And during the school year, there's kids walking up and down that road at 7 o'clock in the morning. heading to the middle school. And so absolutely we need to do better to take care of our youth and take care of our citizens and put sidewalks at least on the main arteries that don't have them, as well as all of our neighborhoods at some point need to have them. I drive through a lot of the other neighborhoods, and this middle part of the Midway Central, I think is what we call it. That in the middle of the triangle does not have a lot of sidewalks in there, right? I mean, that's one of the oldest parts of town here. So, I think it's time that we start looking at how we can invest in our community to make it safer for all age groups, because we are a diverse population in this community. We have from young to old. A lot of people retire here, and I'd like to see it get done. So those are some things that I'm absolutely in favor of trying to make that. And while we're doing that, I think we're replacing infrastructure, right? So here we are in this combining, like there's bound to be a way to make this happen where we fix these aging pipes and storm drains and add sidewalks to our streets for our kids. So absolutely. And our adults and all of us, everybody, the dogs too. The dogs need sidewalks. Bike paths are a great idea too. I saw that the city has been, had some surveys surrounding like that too, and getting, just making it more accessible for everybody that's not driving as well.
Sure.
Yeah.
One other thing that's come up, I mean, it's resolved now, so it's kind of moved, but I'd like to hear your thinking on it.
Sure.
That whole business with the Port of Coupeville buying the airport, the city kicking in a little money for the feasibility study. Do you think that airport needs to be publicly owned?
I got fond memories of that airport. I grew up playing in that neighborhood a little bit when we first moved back in '75 with the family. I used to go down and hang out at their house as a kid near that airport. And so does it need to be publicly owned? I don't know. I honestly couldn't answer that at this point in time. I would say that if it were publicly owned, would it be an asset to our community? I think there's a population that could afford to fly into Oak Harbor. Not every socioeconomic class is going to be able to afford to fly into Oak Harbor.
Yeah.
And there might be, there used to be Harbor Airlines used to fly out of there, and I can remember when my grandmother passed away in '82, my Aunt Susie flew in from, I think they were living in Portugal at the time.
Wow.
And she flew right on into Harbor Airlines. And then they only had to drive a half mile to go get her home so she could be with grandma when grandma passed. And so do we need it? I think it's absolutely has a value to being on the island. Whether it's privately owned or publicly owned, I don't know. That's I would say I'd need more information on that.
That's fair.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes, we'll talk about this. Got a whole list. We actually talked about this with a lot of the candidates, but I'd be interested in hearing your thinking on it. So you talked about on your website about promoting workforce housing, and when we add, I mean, there's really two major approaches that you can take. We'll just talk about the extremes, and you can blend them if you'd like. You can build out. We could expand the urban growth area and build further out of the city. Or we could increase the density requirements in some or all of the city and build effectively up.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a preference?
Boy, I see the benefits of both. And then my heart gets pulled on here a little bit, right? Because, I don't want to, I don't know that in my heart, I don't want to see us be a great big city with skyscrapers.
Sure.
I also know that our fire system right now couldn't handle anything more than above 4 stories, I believe. And so that going up requires a whole lot.
Mm-hmm.
Going out also requires some, though we are effectively working in those areas. I think it's a combination of both. I think we encourage people to go, a little bit higher in the density in town. I think the state's paved some ways for that with some of the recent stuff in the legislature with the AUDs, the auxiliary dwelling units, and what the intent is behind that, right? The intent behind that is to had people be able to put a little bit extra housing on their parcels of land for permanent housing, was the intent behind that.
Yeah.
And so, you know, and I'm big in finding these permanent housings. That ties us into what we talked about really early on about the mental health and my caseload being so, you know, overloaded with the phone calls that come in. If I had some places where I could put some permanent housing in for people that could afford to come in and work, because, you know, mental health counselors don't make millions of dollars, right? Let's just be honest. We work for insurance companies a lot of times, and not for the insurance. We work to, yeah, the insurance companies pay our bills, but they decide a lot of times what our salaries will be, our wages are on the reimbursement. And so knowing that we're kind of in this fixed income range, and to have somebody come in here that might be starting out in a career and looking to make this their home and raise their kids, having a place where they can come in that's workforce. That's why I say workforce affordability, right? These homes that, you know, somewhat in there, and I think the AUDs or auxiliary ADUs, so many acronyms these days, auxiliary dwelling units, right? I think is one way of kind of band-aiding this problem right away. I think that's why that was passed, so to speak. And I think our responsibility as city is to make sure that we can utilize that band-aid long-term and protect our citizens and make sure that they have the right to choose what they do on their land, as well as I think immediately some of these densities being able to allow people to go up a little higher to our max level to help bring in some, you know, single occupancy housing for people to get started on, I think would really be helpful. And how that looks as a whole from the city's perspective of just not getting in the way necessarily, but making sure that it's done right and built correctly, and making sure we have a plan in place as a city on how to handle that infrastructure that's going to be built. That was a great lesson learned on that day, is that these private developers build all these neighborhoods, and then they sell their homes, and the roads become, and the infrastructure becomes the responsibility of the city.
Yeah.
Long term, and we need to make sure we're caring for that long term, and we don't, you know, and I don't know that we're not, I don't know that we are. So I mean, that's one of those things that's on my long list of interviews and questions to go hang out with the engineers and everybody else to get up to speed. So
Yes, well, I had a not quite the same experience you're having. I got on the planning commission. I spent 2 years there and really learned an enormous amount, like I'm sure you are. And really, it's a great opportunity to ask questions. So
yeah,
I'm sure you'll take advantage of that.
we will for sure. They meet, I think, was it Wednesday night a month?
Usually on a Monday. It's usually
Monday.
before a city council meeting.
Okay, yeah. So like next Monday.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's in the evening though, so that is a little more doable with the work schedules. Yeah.
All right. Well, we're getting close to the end of the time. I actually got the timer turned on and I can watch 2 minutes and change. So why don't we wrap up with, what is the best way for people to find out more about you and what you want to do as a city councilman? Is it Facebook or a web page, or?
You know, we do have a Facebook. I would say electchris.org can get you to all of that.
Okay.
And that's probably the quickest and best route in. And you can find me Elect Chris O'Carver on Facebook, but electchris.org is the website. And please come by and see us, read about us, send me emails, ask me questions. Yeah, I want to be available for people, so that we're here for the people.
Right.
Absolutely.
All right, well, thank you so much for taking the time.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me, Alan. It's been great.
Oh, yeah, I think so too.
I'll see you around for sure.
All right. Take care.
All right. Thank you, Alan.
You bet. Bye-bye. Thank you for watching our interview with Oak Harbor City Council candidate Christopher Wiegenstein. We invite you to subscribe to our newsletter, available in 4 local editions: Camano Island, North Whidbey, Central Whidbey, and South Whidbey. The newsletter arrives in your mailbox every Monday morning with news and events from your part of Island County. Subscribe to our newsletter at voterinterests.com/subscribe, and look for more of these candidate interviews as the election season continues. Thank you and good night.